She never spoke to anyone on the flight. Not one word. Passengers thought she was shy. Maybe sad. Maybe tired. Nobody looked twice at the quiet woman in the middle seat. But when the pilot collapsed at 30,000 feet, she stood up. Then her call sign was revealed. Everything changed. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The airport was loud. Hundreds of people moved through the terminal, pulling suitcases, talking on phones, and rushing toward their gates. Announcements echoed from the speakers above. The smell of coffee and fast food filled the air. It was a normal Tuesday morning at Denver International Airport, and Flight 2247 to Washington, D.C. was boarding on time. She was already sitting in her seat when most passengers began walking down the aisle. Seat 24C. A middle seat. Not a window. Not an aisle. The middle seat, the one nobody ever wants, and she had chosen it without complaint. She wore dark blue jeans and a plain gray hoodie. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. No jewelry. No makeup. A small black backpack rested on her lap, and her hands sat quietly on top of it. She was not reading. She was not looking at her phone. She was simply sitting, with her eyes slightly forward and her back completely straight. Her name was Maya Reeves. She was 34 years old. And she had not slept properly in 4 days. The man who took the window seat was named Daniel Okafor. He worked in IT consulting and had taken this flight 17 times in the past 2 years. He noticed her immediately because she was so still. Most people fidgeted. Most people scrolled through their phones or adjusted their headrest or sighed dramatically about legroom. This woman did none of those things. She just sat there like someone who had learned long ago how to disappear inside herself. Daniel gave her a polite nod. She gave him a small nod back. That was the full extent of their conversation. The woman who took the aisle seat arrived next. Her name was Cheryl Barnes, and she was a loud, friendly real estate agent from Colorado who believed that silence between strangers was a problem to be solved. She dropped into her seat, clicked her seatbelt, and immediately looked at Maya with a warm smile. Long flight? Cheryl asked. It's 3 hours, Maya said quietly. Right. Not bad at all. I'm Cheryl. You look exhausted, honey. Long week? Something like that, Maya said. And then she looked forward again, and Cheryl understood, without being told, that the conversation was finished. Cheryl leaned slightly toward Daniel instead. Quiet one, she whispered. Daniel shrugged. Some people just like peace. Cheryl nodded slowly, then glanced back at Maya one more time. There was something about this woman that she could not quite name. Not rudeness. Not sadness, exactly. More like someone who was carrying something heavy and had simply decided not to talk about it. The plane filled up. A young couple argued quietly about who had the wrong boarding pass. A child kicked the back of a seat 3 rows ahead. 2 businessmen in the front argued loudly about a golf game. Normal things. Everyday things. The kind of noise that fills a plane before takeoff and means nothing to anyone. Maya noticed all of it. She noticed the way the flight attendant in the front galley paused twice to check something on her tablet with a slight frown. She noticed that the captain had not yet made his standard pre-boarding announcement. She noticed that the gate agent outside had made 2 phone calls in the last 10 minutes, both of them short and both of them ending with the agent looking back at the plane. Small things. Details that most people never see because most people are not trained to see them. Maya saw them all. She said nothing. The captain's voice finally came through the overhead speakers. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Harris speaking. We are fully boarded and ready for pushback. Weather looks smooth all the way to DC. We're looking at a flight time of about 2 hours and 50 minutes. Sit back, relax, and we'll get you there on time. Cabin crew, please prepare for departure. His voice was steady. Professional. But Maya's eyes moved very slightly to the right when she heard it. Just for a moment. Then she was still again. The plane pushed back from the gate at 8:14 in the morning. Takeoff was smooth. The sky above Denver was clear and pale blue, and within minutes, the city below had become a flat grid of rooftops and roads shrinking into nothing. The seatbelt sign went off. People immediately began standing, reaching into overhead bins, and ordering drinks from the flight attendants who moved efficiently up and down the aisle. Maya did not move. She accepted a cup of water when it was offered, said, "Thank you," in a voice so quiet that the flight attendant almost did not hear it, and then sat with the cup held in both hands. Cheryl tried one more time. "So what do you do?" she asked, leaning slightly toward the middle seat. "I'm between jobs right now," Maya said. "Oh, that's tough. What kind of work were you in?" A short pause. "Aviation," Maya said. "Oh, fun. Like, travel industry?" "Something like that," Maya said again. Cheryl waited for more. More did not come. She turned back to her magazine. 40 minutes passed. The flight was smooth and quiet. Most passengers had settled into their routines, movies on small screens, headphones in, eyes closed. The flight attendants had finished their first service and were resting in the galley. Outside the small oval windows, the sky was a deep, unbroken blue, and the ground below was invisible beneath a thin layer of white cloud. It was at the 47-minute mark that things began to change. It started with a sound. Not a loud sound, just a soft, irregular sound from the front of the plane. The kind of sound that passengers in rows 20 and beyond would never hear. But Maya heard it. Her head did not move, but her eyes shifted toward the front of the cabin. Her right hand, which had been resting flat on her thigh, closed slowly into a loose fist. She waited. 2 minutes later, one of the flight attendants, a young woman named Priya who had been working for the airline for just 8 months, walked quickly from the cockpit door toward the senior flight attendant, Sandra, who was standing near row 10. They spoke in low, urgent voices. Priya's face had gone pale. Sandra's expression changed in a way that she clearly tried to control but could not entirely. Sandra walked to the cockpit door and knocked twice. She waited 3 seconds. She knocked again. The door opened, and Sandra stepped inside. In the rows nearby, 2 or 3 passengers glanced up. Most did not. A man in row 11 had noticed Priya's face and was now watching the cockpit door with the beginning of a frown. Otherwise, the cabin remained calm. Maya unclipped her seatbelt. She did not stand up immediately. She sat for one more moment, and in that moment she was doing something that nobody around her could see. She was running through a sequence in her mind. A checklist. Fast and precise, the way she had done it 10,000 times before in conditions that were far worse than this. Then she stood up. She stepped past Cheryl's knees into the aisle, and she walked to the front of the plane with the same quiet, unhurried step with which she did everything. No rushing. No alarm in her body language. She stopped just short of the cockpit door and looked at Priya. "What happened?" Maya asked. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." "What happened to the captain?" Maya said again. Her voice was not louder. It was just cleaner. More direct. The kind of voice that expects to be answered. Priya hesitated. Then, he collapsed. We think it's his heart. He's unconscious. First Officer Hale is flying the plane but... How long has Hale been certified? Maya asked. I don't know, Is he certified for solo approach on a commercial aircraft? Priya stared at her. "Ma'am, I need you to." "My name is Maya Reeves," Maya said. "I need you to open that door." Sandra came back out of the cockpit at that moment. Her face was tight with controlled fear. She looked at Maya. "Ma'am, the situation is under control. Please. Is the first officer in contact with air traffic control?" Maya said. Sandra stopped. Something in the question, the specificity of it, the calm certainty behind it, made her pause in a way that a simple request never would have. "He is," Sandra said carefully. "Good. I need you to ask him one thing." Maya looked her directly in the eye. "Ask him if he wants help. Tell him my call sign is Viper 6. Ask him if he wants help." There was a silence that lasted about 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, Sandra looked at this woman in the gray hoodie and dark jeans, this quiet, exhausted, ordinary-looking woman who had not said a word to anyone for 47 minutes, and she made a decision. She turned around and went back into the cockpit. The door closed. In the cabin behind them, a few more passengers had noticed that something was happening. A man in row 8 had his seatbelt off. A woman near the window was craning her neck. Cheryl, 3 rows back, was watching the cockpit door with wide eyes. Daniel sat very still beside the empty middle seat. 40 seconds passed. It felt much longer. Then the cockpit door opened again, and Sandra looked out at Maya. "He said yes," Sandra said. And her voice, for the first time, carried something that sounded very close to relief. Maya walked through the door. First Officer James Hale was 29 years old. He had his commercial pilot license. He had 2,200 flight hours, which was a solid number, a good number for someone his age. But he had never, in his professional career, been the only functioning pilot on a commercial aircraft at 30,000 feet with 178 passengers behind him and a captain unconscious on the floor beside him. Captain Harris was on his side on the cockpit floor. Sandra had placed him in the recovery position. His face was gray. He was breathing, but his breathing was slow and uneven. The cockpit was humming with instruments, with the soft automated sounds of a plane flying itself at cruise altitude, and with the crackling of radio contact from Denver Center below. Hale turned when he heard the door open. His face was the face of a man who was holding himself together through pure force of will, and the effort was beginning to show around the edges. He looked at Maya. He saw what everyone saw, a plain woman in a gray hoodie. And for just 1 second, doubt moved across his face. "You're Viper 6, he said. "Yes," Maya said. "I don't know that call sign," Hale said. "You wouldn't," Maya said simply. "It's classified." She moved to the captain's seat and sat down with the smooth, practiced ease of someone who had sat in that exact type of seat, or something very similar, hundreds of times. Her hands moved to the controls without hesitation. She looked at the instrument panel the way a musician looks at a keyboard, quickly, completely, reading everything at once. "Altitude?" she asked. 30,000 feet. Cruising speed 480 knots. Autopilot engaged. Fuel. 71%. More than enough. What did ATC say? "I declared emergency 2 minutes ago. They've cleared the airspace ahead. Reagan National is prepared for emergency landing." "Dulles is better," Maya said immediately. "Longer runway, better emergency response team. Request divert to Dulles." Hale looked at her. Then he picked up the radio. "Denver Center, this is Flight 2247. We are requesting divert to Washington Dulles. Medical emergency on board, single pilot situation. Requesting priority handling." The response came back within seconds. "Flight 2247, divert approved. Dulles is standing by. You are priority traffic. Contact Washington Center on 124.65. Maya was already adjusting the flight plan on the navigation system. Her fingers moved across the instruments with the kind of calm precision that comes not from being unafraid, but from having been afraid so many times that fear has simply become background noise. "How long have you been flying?" Hale asked. He was watching her hands. 15 years, Maya said. "Commercial?" She glanced at him. "Mostly not." He understood then, or began to. He did not ask more questions. He watched her work, and what he saw made the knot in his chest loosen, just slightly, for the first time since Captain Harris had grabbed his own arm and slid sideways out of his seat 20 minutes ago. "He needs a hospital," Maya said, looking down at Harris briefly. "Sandra has called ahead. There will be a medical team at Dulles." "Good." Maya looked back at the horizon. The autopilot was holding the plane steady, and the sky ahead was clear. "Then we have time. Talk me through your concerns." Hale blinked. "My concerns? About the approach. What are you most worried about?" He hesitated. Then he said, honestly, "Crosswind landing. The forecast at Dulles has a 15-knot crosswind from the southwest. I've practiced it in simulation, but I've only done it twice in actual conditions." Maya nodded. "Okay. I'll handle the crosswind correction. You monitor instruments and call out speeds. We're a crew. You're not alone." Hale looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay." In the cabin, the passengers had been told. Sandra had picked up the intercom with the kind of steady, rehearsed voice that flight attendants are trained to use in exactly this situation, calm, clear, honest without being terrifying. "Ladies and gentlemen, we want to give you an update on our flight. Captain Harris has experienced a medical issue and is being cared for on board. First Officer Hale is flying the aircraft, and we have an additional qualified pilot who has joined him in the cockpit. We have declared a routine precautionary emergency and will be landing at Washington Dulles Airport, where full emergency services are standing by. The aircraft is flying normally. We expect a smooth landing in approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes. We ask that you remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants will be coming through the cabin shortly." The cabin reacted the way cabins always react to this kind of announcement, first silence, then a rising wave of voices. Cheryl had her hand over her mouth. Daniel was gripping the armrest with both hands. The man in row 8 who had already taken off his seatbelt had put it back on and tightened it. A child somewhere in the back was asking his mother what was happening, and the mother was saying, in a voice 3 notes higher than normal, "Everything is fine, baby, everything is fine." And they waited. In the cockpit, Maya flew. She had not flown a commercial aircraft in 2 years. Her last certification had been in a very different kind of aircraft, faster, lower, with instruments designed for a completely different kind of mission. But the fundamental language of flight does not change. The physics does not change. The relationship between a pilot and an aircraft, the way you read it, the way you feel the subtle shifts in air pressure through the controls, the way you anticipate what the plane needs before it tells you, that does not change either. She had grown up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the daughter of a crop duster pilot who used to take her up in his single-engine Cessna when she was 6 years old. By the time she was 14, she could fly that Cessna herself. By the time she was 18, she had her private pilot license. By the time she was 22, she had walked into a military recruiting office and told them she wanted to fly fighters. They had laughed at first. Then they had tested her. And then they had stopped laughing. She had spent 12 years flying aircraft that most people do not know exist, in places that do not appear on any official record, in conditions that the aviation textbooks describe as unsurvivable. She had landed on carrier decks in the black of night with a crosswind strong enough to push a small car sideways. She had performed emergency procedures at altitudes so low that the treetops were visible through the cockpit glass. She had kept flying when every instrument was damaged and the only thing left to navigate by was instinct and experience and the absolute refusal to stop. She had left the service 8 months ago. Not because she was asked to leave. Because she had decided it was time, after 12 years, to find out who she was when she was not Viper 6. She was still working that out. She had booked the middle seat on Flight 2247 because she was going to her brother's wedding in D.C. She had her dress in the small suitcase in the overhead bin. She had her gift card in the front pocket of her backpack. She had been planning, for the first time in longer than she could remember, to be an ordinary person doing an ordinary thing. That plan had changed at the 47-minute mark. She did not mind. Washington Center had cleared the airspace around Dulles completely. Below them, invisible beneath the cloud layer, emergency vehicles were already being positioned on and around runway 1 right, the longest runway, the best choice for an aircraft in this situation. Air traffic controllers in the Dulles Tower were tracking Flight 2247 on their screens with the particular quality of attention that comes only during real emergencies. Flight 2247, you are radar contact. Begin your descent to flight level 180 at your discretion. Washington Center, Flight 2247 beginning descent, Maya said. Her voice through the radio was the same as it was everywhere else, quiet, level, without drama. She pulled back the throttle slightly and felt the nose of the aircraft begin to pitch forward into the descent. The altimeter began unwinding. 30,000, 29,000. 28,000. Speed, she asked. 450 knots, Hale said, watching the airspeed indicator. Reducing. Good. I want 300 knots by flight level 250. Call it out as we approach. Roger. Captain Harris, still on the cockpit floor, had begun to groan softly. It was the sound of someone returning to partial consciousness, not a good sound, but a better sound than silence. Sandra had come back into the cockpit briefly to check on him. She reported to Maya that his color had slightly improved. He needs to stay still, Maya said. Keep his head level and do not let him try to sit up. Sandra nodded and returned to her position beside him. The clouds came up to meet them at 22,000 feet. The plane entered the cloud layer and the windows turned white-gray. Turbulence, light, but present, shook the aircraft in small, rhythmic bumps. Hale's hands moved instinctively toward the controls. Leave it, Maya said quietly. It's light chop. The autopilot is handling it. At what point do we take manual control, he asked. I'll take it manual at 10,000. We'll do a visual approach. She paused. Unless you want to take it manual earlier. It's your call. He looked at her. She had said it completely without condescension, a genuine question, offering him the authority that was technically his as the certified first officer on this flight. No, he said. Your call. You've got more hours. Okay. Autopilot until 10,000. Then I go manual. Understood. The cloud layer broke at 14,000 feet, and suddenly the ground was below them, the green and gray patchwork of Northern Virginia in autumn, cut through with highways and river bends and the sprawl of a major city reaching toward them. Dulles Airport appeared in the distance, its distinctive curved terminal building visible even from this altitude. Visual contact with Dulles, Maya said into the radio. Flight 2247, you are cleared for visual approach to runway 1 right. Wind 230 at 14. Altimeter 29.92. Emergency services are on the field. Flight 2247, cleared for visual approach, runway 1 right. Thank you. She clicked off autopilot at 10,200 feet. The aircraft was instantly alive in her hands, not in a frightening way, but in the way that any aircraft is alive when a human takes control. She could feel the slight pressure of the air against the control surfaces. She could feel the gentle, constant correction that is required to keep a commercial jet stable during a visual approach. She made the adjustments automatically, smoothly, without thinking about them, the way a very experienced driver does not think about steering. Flaps 15, she said. Hale deployed the flaps. The aircraft's nose rose slightly, then settled. Speed? 220 knots. Reducing. Call gear down at 180. Roger. They were at 8,000 feet and descending steadily. The runway was ahead and below them, growing slowly larger. Maya could see the emergency vehicles on the taxiways flanking the runway, the yellow fire trucks, the blue and red of ambulances, the orange-vested personnel at their stations. They were small from this altitude. They would be larger very soon. 180 knots, Hale said. Gear down. The landing gear extended with the familiar deep mechanical thud. 3 green lights appeared on the panel, all 3 gear down and locked. Gear down, 3 green, Hale confirmed. Flaps 30. Another adjustment. The aircraft slowed further. They were at 5,000 feet. The runway was now clearly visible and aligned ahead of them. Maya was flying a perfect centerline approach, which Hale could see on the ILS display even though she was not using the instrument, she was doing it entirely by eye. The crosswind was there. She could feel it pressing on the left side of the aircraft, a constant, patient pressure trying to push them sideways off the runway centerline. She was correcting for it continuously, a small, constant left aileron input combined with a slight right rudder to keep the nose aligned with the runway while the fuselage crabbed sideways into the wind. "You're holding a 12-degree crab angle," Hale said quietly, reading it off the heading indicator. His voice carried a note of something he was not quite saying. "Yes," Maya said. "That's textbook." She did not respond. She was at 2,000 feet. The runway threshold markings were visible, the white stripes painted on the overrun area before the landing surface. The lights of the precision approach were flashing their white and red pattern below and ahead. 1,500 feet. 1,000 feet. The aircraft entered the final phase of the approach. Maya reduced thrust smoothly. The descent rate stabilized at 700 feet per minute, exactly correct. She held the crosswind correction steadily, and she was aware of nothing except the runway, the controls, and the thin ribbon of sound from the engines that told her everything about the aircraft's energy state. "Minimums," Hale said. "Continue," Maya said. 500 feet. She began to reduce the crab angle, feeding in right aileron to level the wings while holding left rudder to keep the nose pointed straight down the runway centerline. It was the crosswind landing technique executed perfectly. The aircraft straightened out over the threshold, the left main gear touched first to compensate for the drift, then the right main gear, then the nose gear settling firmly onto the centerline. Spoilers deployed. Thrust reversers engaged. Maya pressed the brakes smoothly and the aircraft decelerated firmly down the runway, the emergency vehicles beginning to move alongside them outside. The speed reduced. 120 knots. 90 knots. 60 knots. 40 knots. They were on the ground. They were stopped. They were safe. For 2 full seconds after the aircraft came to a halt, nobody in the cockpit spoke. Then James Hale exhaled. It was the longest exhale Maya had ever heard from another human being. It sounded like a man releasing every breath he had been holding for the past hour and a half. "You," he said. And then he stopped, because he did not have the words for the rest of it. "You did well," Maya said. "You made good decisions." He shook his head slowly. "I would not have managed without you. You called the emergency correctly. You diverted to Dulles. Those were your decisions and they were right. Give yourself credit." The sound of the emergency vehicles surrounding the aircraft was audible now, the rumble of engines, the distant crackle of radios. The paramedics would be boarding soon for Captain Harris. Maya stood up from the captain's seat. She was in the aisle of the cockpit, putting on her backpack, when Hale spoke again. "Viper 6, he said. She turned. He was looking at her with an expression that was not quite awe and not quite gratitude and not quite disbelief, something that contained all 3. "Where did you fly?" She looked at him for a moment. The same small, quiet look she had given Cheryl when Cheryl had asked too many questions. But this was a different question, from a different person, in a very different moment. "Places that don't show up on maps," she said. Then she opened the cockpit door and walked back into the cabin. 178 passengers turned to look at her as she walked out. There was a moment, just one moment, when the entire cabin was completely silent. And then Cheryl Barnes, in seat 24B, began to clap. She was the first. Daniel Okafor joined her half a second later. And then it spread, row by row, from the front of the aircraft to the back, until every person on Flight 2247 was applauding. Maya stopped walking. She stood in the aisle with her backpack over one shoulder and her face slightly flushed and her expression caught somewhere between uncomfortable and something softer. She was not a woman who was used to applause. She was used to classified debriefs in rooms with no windows, and official reports that would never be made public, and a kind of service that is specifically designed to happen without anyone ever knowing your name. She was used to doing impossible things in the dark and then going home and being ordinary. She raised one hand briefly, not quite a wave, more of an acknowledgement, and then she walked back to her seat. She sat down. She clipped her seatbelt. She placed her hands on her backpack. Cheryl was staring at her with wide, wet eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. Maya looked at her. And this time, something changed in her face. Just slightly. The smallest, most cautious beginning of a smile. "I told you," Maya said. "Between jobs. Aviation." Cheryl laughed. It was a shaky, overwhelmed laugh, the kind that comes out when the alternative is crying. "I think you're going to need to explain what that means." "No," Maya said gently. "I really don't." And Cheryl, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, decided that some answers are complete exactly as they are. The paramedics brought Captain Harris off the plane on a stretcher. His eyes were open by then, and his color had returned. He would later be diagnosed with a hypertrophic cardiac event, serious but treatable. He would spend 5 days in a hospital in Virginia, during which time James Hale would visit him twice. Harris asked Hale what happened on the approach. Hale described it. Harris lay quiet for a moment after the description was complete. Then he said, "Get me her name." Hale said, "All I have is the call sign. The airline is trying to find her through the passenger manifest, but she's already checked out of the airport. Nobody knows where she went." Harris looked at the ceiling. "Viper 6, he said quietly. "I've heard that call sign before. Years ago. Military channels. I didn't think it was a real person." "She's real," Hale said. Harris nodded slowly. "Find her," he said. "I want to say thank you." They did find her, eventually. It took 11 days. The airline's legal team made the request through the appropriate channels, and the appropriate channels made a few quiet inquiries, and eventually a phone number was provided with the instruction that she was not to be identified publicly by her real name or her call sign in any press release or media statement. She had made that condition clear before she agreed to be found. She was in Albuquerque by then. She had made it to the wedding, barely, on a later flight, and she had worn her dress and danced with her brother and cried at all the right moments and behaved, for one entirely normal weekend, like a person who had never done anything more extraordinary than show up with a gift card and a smile. The airline's chief operations officer called her and spoke with her for 22 minutes. He thanked her. He offered her things. She declined most of them. "Is there anything we can do for you?" he asked, at the end of the call. Maya thought about it for a moment. Outside the window of her apartment in Albuquerque, the desert sky was turning orange and pink with the end of the day. A crow was sitting on the power line across the street. The air was very still. "Yes," she said. "Make sure First Officer Hale gets his captain's certification moved up. He earned it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes. We can do that." Is there anything for you? No, Maya said. I'm good. She hung up and went to make dinner. She was frying eggs when her phone buzzed again. It was a number she did not recognize. She answered anyway. A man's voice said, "Is this Viper 6? She paused. Who's asking? My name is Harris, the man said. You saved my plane. She leaned against the kitchen counter. The eggs were starting to burn slightly. She turned the heat down. You scared a lot of people, she said. I know. I'm sorry about that. I wanted to call you myself. Not through the airline. Just me, calling to say, I don't have the right words. I've been flying for 31 years and nobody has ever, he stopped. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you. Maya looked at the eggs in the pan. They were a little overdone on the edges, but still fine. She slid them onto a plate and carried it to the small table by the window where the desert sky was almost fully dark now, and the first stars were beginning to appear. You're welcome, Captain, she said. Rest well. She ended the call and set her phone face down on the table. She ate her eggs. They were quiet eggs, at a quiet table, in a quiet apartment at the edge of the desert. The crow on the power line was gone. Somewhere in the city, a dog was barking twice and then stopping. The refrigerator hummed. It was, she thought, a very good evening. She had not asked for recognition. She had not carried a badge or worn a uniform or told anyone on that plane who she was or what she had done in her 12 years of service. She had simply done what the moment required, in the way that she had always done things, quietly, completely, and without waiting for anyone to ask. That was the only way she had ever known how to be. The world had a way of calling on people who had learned to wait in silence, to sit in middle seats without complaint, to watch without being watched, to carry their whole selves without display. The world had a way of discovering, at the exact moment when it mattered most, that the quiet ones are sometimes the ones who are holding everything together. Maya Reeves had been Viper 6 for 12 years. She would always be Viper 6, the way certain things about a person cannot be separated from them no matter how far they travel or how ordinary they try to become. But she was also a woman eating eggs at a table by a window in Albuquerque, watching the stars come out over the desert, not particularly in a hurry to be anything to anyone. She was, for the first time in a long time, exactly where she wanted to be. And somewhere above the earth, on any given night, at any given altitude, there were other planes crossing the dark sky, carrying hundreds of other ordinary people who would never know the name of every person keeping them safe. That was how she liked it. That was how it had always been.